I believed that content had a part to play in the world of the internet. I think that the biggest lesson there for anybody listening, I think, is that, find somebody that, that's walked your walk and has that lived experience of the thing that you want to build. You've got to understand that whatever it is that you're doing, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's going to take more time, more effort, more focus. It's going to be much harder, more painful than you think it is.
Guys, what's going on? We got another episode of the One Network here. I got Simon Penson with me. He is a B2B sort of expert, exited founder, involved in the VC space as well. I think he's going to have a bunch of interesting topics and story for you guys today, especially those of you that are doing, sales and marketing agencies. Simon, for the early stage entrepreneurial audience, can you give a quick background as to how you got involved in business in the first place?
That's a good place to start, and thanks for having me on, Chris.
Absolutely.
Where do I start? I was lucky, I think, in the sense that I was born at the right time. So I entered the working kind of world in the late '90s, at mid to late '90s, when the internet was becoming a thing, and I've basically remained fascinated with it ever since as a kind of proper digital native entrepreneur. Got loads of things wrong, of course, and a couple of things have come off. Is kind of the journey, really. Started in publishing. That taught me that the world was changing, and built some sites, built a group of sites that became a content affiliate sites, a bit of a media kind of network, and ended up selling that. Then started a kind of a consultancy that became an agency that actually ended up being a pretty significant exit, which I'm sure we'll talk about. We're well over 250 people by the end of that. Sold that into
Wow.
public, and then sort of alongside that, but then more recently, spent time, helping to build an early stage VC business that invests now in B2B SaaS, which I'm just kind of in the process of exiting, actually. And to kind of lean more into kind of slightly later stage, which so getting involved more in kind of private equity, kind of NED and NXT and chair positions, and a bit of investment there. So kind of starting to move up the value chain a little bit. So yeah, in a very small nutshell, that's kind of been the journey.
Got it. So you were talking about like being in the publishing industry, sort of being a digital native. Can you talk about like how that sort of inspired you going after your first company and just like the whole concept of that?
Yeah, I think it really acted as a budget in the mine shaft, right? Because when you're working in print publishing in the late '90s, early 2000s, we went from the zenith where 2000, 99, 2000, you ruled the world. Quite frankly, we were in the world of magazines, consumer magazines, and you very quickly realised that that however good they were, that the audience was migrating somewhere else. And luckily, I'd been building my own sites as well, and as terrible as they were really growing, steadily but surely. And so that for me was the real moment that I was like, there's something seismic happening here in the consumption, easy for me to say, of information. And that really, I think, spurred me on to, one, double down on those sites, which gave me runway to leave the corporate world behind, and obviously, two, ultimately to kind of form the agency to teach others how to do that. And that was a great journey.
Nice. Um, did you always see yourself as somebody who was an entrepreneur? Like we look at like kind of this lemonade stand type people where people are like doing, business as kids. Some people have a career for 10, 20 years, whatever, and then they go out and form a company. Like what was your kind of psychological outlook or sort of makeup?
Yeah, I think that's always fascinating. I love digging into that with people. I remember pretty young, actually, really young, sitting at the table and having breakfast in the mornings, and like realizing that I'm reading the back of the cereal packs to work out who actually makes the cereal and where do they come from, and what else do they own, and all that kind of stuff. So I've always had a fascination with business. And I ended up actually getting in trouble at school because I ended up forming a club in that primary school. So, like very early, sort of 6, 7 years old, forming a club, for a sports club, basically, and charging pupils. I think it was 20 pence, obviously British, 20p at the time. And I remember the school finding out and making me give all the money back. So it started, I think,
Yeah.
pretty early, and continued from there.
Yeah. Nice. Um, cool. So tell me about like the content marketing agency and build, you were talking about scaling it to the point that obviously getting it exited, but what were some of the early stages or challenges in doing the company in the first place? I think a lot of people in our accelerator are like younger. So they were, you know what I'm saying? They weren't involved in like the early internet SEO kind of bubble, but tell us a little bit about like that, those early stages of doing the agency.
Yeah, I mean, because that business really was founded in sort of back end of 2008, 2009, and the
Sure.
world of SEO existed then, but we took a real cut, really really lent into it with much more content view. Obviously, were you before Panda and Penguin and all the changes to the Google that changed all that and made that more prominent. But that came back from my background, right? And so I believed that content had a part to play in the world of the internet. And so, but it was really hard for us to begin with, really, really hard. We grew really slowly. I think we went from zero, like me on my own, to 12 people over the first 3 or 4 years because we had to educate the market. So out of necessity rather than design, but it actually helped us later on. We ended up building sort of a sales and marketing first approach to our business, and really kind of worked on go to market, which is critical now, wasn't as talked about then. But we really worked hard on that, and we grew slowly because of the fact that we had to do so much education that people didn't understand that they needed to. Digital budgets hadn't been migrated, all of those kind of things that were standing in our way. But we kept banging the drum, and over time, the world came to us. Really, we'd refined and defined what content marketing was. I think we were one of the first to do that, as we would all know that now. And we blazed a bit of a trail, and obviously we were able to ride that wave. And from then on, we grew really quickly. And by the time we were acquired in 2016, we were 125 people, I think. And then next 3 years we grew and sort of more than doubled again. So yeah, it was a really interesting journey. Very tired at the end of it. Made lots of mistakes, but wouldn't change it for the world.
Talking about the company size, how to, something that's been a challenge for me, at least as an entrepreneur, is hiring people, getting talent. Like, what is scaling to like a company of 250 employees? Like, how long does that take to like, get to that level, and how are you dealing with hiring to like create middle managers and just a hierarchy and a structure in the company?
Good question. So I have and I don't know if it's fair to say this because if there are any recruiters out there listening, then I apologise. But I
Yeah,
had a dislike of recruiters. So to begin with, I realised I think quite quickly that personal outreach from me, the MD CEO, was the best way of getting traction. So I ended up doing a lot of work in the evenings on recruitment to find the right people. Realised as well that having a proper understanding of kind of the culture we wanted to build, the mission that we had was really key. Understanding our why, to put it the Simon Sinek way, was very important because it meant that we could hire people not just on skill set, but more importantly on kind of cultural fit. And we looked for something called voracious appetite for learning, actually, that really helped us find some real gems in the mire, and really build out those people really quickly. And we ended up finding some brilliant people that way earlier. Then later, of course, as you scale, there's a requirement to bring experience into the team, of course, and that's critical. And a lot of people miss that, I think. And then eventually, we ended up with a recruiter in house, and we did quite a lot of employer brand work as well to help with that. So
in terms of the client acquisition and actually like scaling the revenue, was there a particular, I mean, channel, be it, what I'm saying, referrals, more, like how did you guys scale and like get new clients and grow over the however many years you were working on that company?
it's an interesting question, and obviously I spend a lot of time with agency and SaaS businesses now, as a consultant and kind of as a non-exec as well, and so I see now what works, and it is different now than what it used to be. And I think the back then it was very much about doing a lot of public speaking. So I used to spend a lot of time at shows, speaking on stages, that kind of stuff, and also writing what we would probably call guest blogs now, but for kind of industry publications,
Affiliate
that kind of
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So those two, I think, were the two key pillars. But it's no, it looks very different now.
Cool. I'm going to just pause for a second. Okay, cool. So tell me about like how did the exit come about? Was that something that you planned to have happen? Like, were you prepared? Did you build the company in a way that it could be sold, or was it something that came up kind
Yeah, no,
of
I think we
coincidentally?
did. Yeah, no, I think we did. I think we built it in a methodical way, and we really invested in back office. So we hired more good people than I think we probably needed to at the level of revenue, even when we sold actually. But that's why we took the deal that we did at the time. We took less up front, but gave us the greater opportunity to earn more over the earn out, which everybody told us we were crazy to do. But we did it because we knew that we'd like properly invested in back office, and we knew that we could treble the business easily with the kind of the senior team that we had, and we had to back ourselves to do it. So but
No.
yeah, that's basically been the journey. Really, is that we've kind of worked through that, and I think realised that that investment, when it feels uncomfortable, is usually a really good sign that you're hiring somebody that you perhaps feel like you can't quite afford, but they're going to be really good. I don't think, I hand on heart, I can ever say that I've regretted any of those hires.
Got it. Cool. So we're
That, and you have to remove those distractions, because that's what they are in the end. In order to win, it requires a greater level of intensity and determination and willpower, thick skin over a longer period of time than you could ever really imagine. And so, I think those things can be great distractions. So it's, double down on the one big idea is always my kind of ethos, really.
got it. Okay. But was it something like where you simultaneously, like I had a couple of founders on where they're like, they talk about how the influence of their family and like wife and kids on the business. Were you like, how all in were you on the company
Yeah, all in, yeah. And I think in the end that was a bit of a motivation to, to be acquired,
to
because,
get out of it? Yeah.
yeah, it was becoming more and more intense. And we had two children, through that early stage. And, I want to say I was an absent father, because that's probably a little bit strong, but I was certainly very focused on the business and working, 12 hours plus a day often. So, that ultimately meant that I was doing other things not so well, quite frankly. And so, yeah, that was a big motivation in the end for, for wanting to kind of look in a different direction.
Got it. Okay. So walk me through, I guess, where's your focus after that exit? Like, what are you doing immediately after?
So yeah, I mean, that is a very good question. I think it's something that not enough people talk about, actually. Is that really having that plan and having it thoroughly thought through is a really important part of the exit process for the founder, the people that are leaving. I probably didn't think enough about that, if I'm really honest, and it is really difficult for a while, because you come out, the email inbox goes to zero, the meetings stop, all of those things, the interaction with
Right.
people with all the time goes away, and it's really quiet. And I think for initially it feels like a holiday, then it feels like a curse. I think is probably the best way of describing it. And there's that element of, somebody once described it to me, because I had advisors through it, and they're kind of pre-warned that this would happen. That like you go to bed in the evening with your baby in the corner, and you wake up in the morning, and the crib is full of money. And that's probably a nice way of describing that kind of early experience, quite frankly. Yeah, it took some getting used to and adjusted to, but thankfully I had the VC work to do, and it meant that I could kind of really jump in, pretty deeply, and spend a lot of my time, my free time, then on kind of helping the founders of those kind of early stage businesses. And it did a couple of things to me, quite frankly. It was very validating for the lessons that we learned, because when you're building your own thing, you think you just kind of survive it, don't you? But then when you come out of it and you see other people going through the similar sort of challenges, growth challenges, you realize that there's something in this, and there's a process, and you can help, and you can remove the pain. And that did the second thing, which was made me realize that I found a purpose there, and I really love it. And even to this day, I can hand on heart say that I spend every day, every hour of every day working with founders now. And it doesn't feel like work to me, because I kind of, because I've been there, I sense that frustration and the pain and the sleepless nights, and so being able to fix that a little bit is a great thing.
Got it. Okay, cool. So, any kind of lessons you learned on that for the first company that either were surprising or, you know what I'm saying, you wouldn't have known coming in? I know in business, I've learned a lot of things where like people told me the lesson before I made the mistake, and I didn't really learn it, but then I had to like feel it myself. Do you know what I'm saying? To
I do.
actually like improve as a business owner.
And I think it's interesting. I see that every, not every day, but certainly every week. I see that through the work that I do with others now. Is that sometimes like, and it's the challenge as a non-exec or a consultant now, actually, is to kind of realize that that it's going to turn out like that, but sometimes people ultimately have to crash into that wall to realize that you were right. And that was my experience. I was very lucky to have a couple of great advisors along the way, and they did the same for me, and so the cycle continues. Um, and there are several. There are a multitude of examples of that. Like particularly around things like hiring, and the loss of really key staff members, or the loss of key clients. The fact that the big kind of marketing push or whatever you've invested in isn't working. There are so many multitude of examples of that playing out that it's kind of almost impossible to count. But yeah, I think that the biggest lesson there for anybody listening, I think, is that find somebody that that's walked your walk and has that lived experience of the thing that you want to build. Make sure you do trust them, but then trust them and listen, because that can definitely accelerate the and perhaps lessen the impact of mistakes a little bit.
Got it. Um, cool. So, did you have co-founders in any of these businesses, and what impact did like the team or the other founding, the co-founders have on the business?
Yeah, so no, not in the content kind of the kind of content
The agency.
effectiveness. Yeah, that they didn't exist in that, and they didn't exist to begin with in the agency. We ended up actually merging, interestingly, with another agency through the process of growing our own. So, and I was a single founder, and there was a single founder in that business as well. So, ended up with a co-founder, in inverted commas, through that process, um, which actually worked pretty well, and kind of learned that that's a very different thing, and that I think you need to find and spend a lot of time on culture and fit, before making those decisions. Same thing as when you're being acquired, actually. Um, to look for that. And now, obviously, through the early stage kind of VC world, spend a lot of time investing ultimately in understanding, the makeup of co-founders and team, because actually we like to look for, co-founders. I like to, invest in businesses where there are more than one founder, particularly where one of them is commercial as well. Because I think, however technical a business is, it's really go to market and sales and marketing that get it off the ground for those, first couple of years. So, looking for that skill set within the founding team is key as well.
Got it. Okay. Um, what is so? How do you think the landscape of kind of marketing or building a B2B company has changed in the last, since you sold the company till today?
I would say really significantly, and I think a lot of that has been driven by competition. Most markets now are very highly competitive and quite fragmented, and I think that's been accelerated through COVID, because a lot of people launched their own new things during that kind of change in lifestyle. So yeah, the market is very messy and fragmented at the moment. Not helped obviously by what's been continues to be to a degree, but a more challenging macro environment. And then obviously alongside that, there's been a fragmentation of audience as well, and I think a lot of people are getting it more wrong than I think has been the case for a long time on the sales and marketing side now, because it has changed so much, and people are still trying to do what they did 5 years ago and expecting it to work, and it doesn't, and it requires a much greater level of expertise and personalization, and a kind of a widened aperture view of how you approach you'd kind of funnel acquisition, and how you bring sales and marketing much closer together, and all of those sort of things.
Yeah. What are your goals and kind of objectives now as an entrepreneur? Like, what are you working on? What are you like hoping to achieve in the next couple of years?
I think what I've realised is that, as I said, I've been lucky now that I've had obviously a significant exit, and I think that clearly, and I understand the privilege of saying it changes your view somewhat, in the sense that
Sure.
you no longer have to work on something that you have to work on. You work on it because you love doing it, and so purpose is really important, which is why Scaled exists, and why I spent so long in the kind of early stage space. But I think now, through that process, I think I am learning as well that I really like to kind of spend more time in fewer businesses, and that's why I think I'm starting to do more and more work in the private equity space, because obviously they put bigger checks into smaller number of businesses, and you're able to, with that kind of that dynamic, you're able to really make a difference and help them with M&A strategy as well, and buy and build, and help them design and build a really really significant senior team, and enterprise all the back office kind of functions and stuff. So really looking forward to getting stuck into that next, I think.
Got it. Um, cool. What are, like, tying everything together, biggest takeaways for people starting their first company? What would you say to focus on? What are your sort of guiding principles?
That's a big question, isn't it? I would
Very
say,
big question.
I think you've got to look yourself in the mirror, haven't you? And you've got to understand that whatever it is that you're doing, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's gonna take more time, more effort, more focus. It's going to be much harder, more painful than you think it is. I think there's a really good saying that you underestimate what you can do in 10 years, but massively overestimate what you can do in a month or a year or so. So I think take the view that this is a 5 to 10 year journey at least, and that you're going to have to make sacrifices. That the round of golf that you played 3 times a week isn't going to happen anymore. If you've got kids, you are going to have to accept that you're going to spend less time with them in order to be successful. And there's no right or wrong at that. Most people will probably look at that and go, "That's not sane. That's not fair. That's not right." In which case, great. That's the point at which not to start. I think a lot of people make the mistake of running
Mm,
in thinking it's going to be all sunshine and flowers, and then a year down the line they're really deeply unhappy because it's either not working or it's asking much more of them than they realized. So I think it's really understanding that, do you have the ability, the time, the moment in your life, the flexibility, the determination and willpower to actually to drag that thing into existence. And if you do, hats off to you. It's the best journey in the world, but just don't see it as sunshine and rainbows.
got it. Wise words there. Simon, where can people find you, and what's the best way to keep up to date with your companies and what you're doing?
LinkedIn's the usual answer, isn't it? So /Simon Penson. I'm also, you can get me on Simon at scaled.co.uk, SCALED. That's the kind of consulting
Okay,
business. And always
cool.
happy to, have a kind of virtual coffee and all of those things. So it'd be great to chat.
And what businesses do you work with on the consulting business? If anybody is maybe in that.
Yeah, so it's B2B service and SaaS, but it's within that
Okay,
it's mainly agencies and software businesses.
got it.
B2B.
Cool. Guys,
Good
this
stuff.
is the One Network. Simon, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Storm.